All right, I'm sharing right now.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Federal.
Hmm.
Let's go back to that. Won't be interrupted by a phone call from the dog people. Already did the dog. Already
Already
got the
take care.
dog.
He's already been shaved and groomed
He's
and all
got
that
he's
fluff.
got his Super Bowl haircut ready to go.
Looking forward to seeing him on Sunday so we can see how pretty he is.
Super Bowl haircut. It just occurred to me that if we would have had this a year ago, this would have been only 3 or 4 weeks after his surgery. He was not in good condition at that point. He couldn't walk around easily, couldn't jump around. It would have been bad. It would have been a bad scene. I would have had to have made you watch the game outside. That's what I would have had to.
Now he's all sprightly and everything.
Yeah, you can't tell. You can't tell. Now it's the $6 million man. Better,
they rebuilt him.
better than he was. Better than he was. Yeah. All right, ready?
Ready.
It is the Brad and Britt cast. Glad you're with us. Thank you. Hello. What do you got? What do you got? Put your cards out on the table, big boy. Let's see what you brought to the party today.
Well, I knew that you might think that this is wrestling, but I was looking at the story, and it was very public yesterday when Mitch McConnell decided that he was upset that the RNC had called what happened on January the 6th of 2021 legitimate political discourse, and he denounced them. He denounced them, and also for censuring Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. There's the story.
Correct.
Everybody's got it. That's the New York Times version. McConnell denounces RNC censure of the January 6th panel members. He says they're full of shit. Now, do you think this is wrestling where he pretends to be upset at Roma McDaniel and the RNC for their whole statement? Of course, she was her protest at the media reporting the truth about that story was fantastic.
Yeah, see, I think the baseline, this is difficult because in an isolated stance, Mitch McConnell is, one of the couple worst human beings walking around in America. He is personally responsible for a lot of the things that are wrong, but he is open and transparent about being just a power-hungry, ideologically free fraud who, it should always be remembered, Mitch McConnell was a liberal Democrat in his young years. Mitch McConnell, I believe, I don't know if there was an intern he was there when the Voting Rights Act was signed, like the original one. He was like around, okay, and he supported it in Kentucky, okay, as a Democrat. And then he saw the way that in Kentucky over time to be a successful politician is to become a piece of shit, and which he's done that ever since then. And he's done everything, to undermine every Democratic president that's come along in his path the last 20 years. We know that. That being said, Mitt Romney's niece, who dropped her middle name, Ronna Romney McDaniel, several years ago, which I believe under the Barack Hussein Obama rule, we should call her Ronna Romney McDaniel, which of course in our eyes would elevate her slightly over the dregs from which she normally resides. What a horrible person she is. What a dreadful human being she is. And then to lie the last few days. And it gets so tiring. And I guess this is what they do. This is how a dictatorship rises. They tire out the opposition. You throw your hands up. You say, all right, God damn it. I just somebody collect the garbage. Okay. I don't care about, that's what they're doing. And every one of these is trying to turn it around and attempt to say that all of us who, again, are stupid enough to believe our eyes and believe our ears and believe what we read when we see the three words legitimate political discourse, and her attempt to say that we're lying. That's not what they really meant and or said in that statement. How dare you people say that? And it's just the same game. It's the identical. And so even Mitch McConnell wouldn't go there. Not interested in doing that. Mitch McConnell can be a straightforward piece of shit in his own way, but it isn't by denying what happened on January 6th. It isn't by denying that Donald Trump is the heart and soul of what happened on January 6th. There is no doubt about that. McConnell said it. Kevin McCarthy said it and then pretended he didn't say it. And now is even worse. But at least McConnell isn't going back in that way. And so, again, remember how low the bar is for this. You know, the bar is 3 inches off the ground. Mitch McConnell just walked over it. He didn't lie about what happened on January 6th again in the past few days. And so this idea that we can't even open the door the slightest to entertain the disingenuous liars, the pathological Trumpists who dominate the Republican Party right now. And we can't give any quarter to those who dance around it on the fringes, including Mitch McConnell, who, even if what he said in the last few days, hey, it reads good, it sounds good, looks like he at least gets that part of it. He's trying to separate himself and most of the Republicans who not only secretly, but publicly, if they could, would say that Donald Trump is 5 steps lower than horse dung. He also has never said, for instance, that if Donald Trump were the nominee in 2024, that he wouldn't vote for him. Okay. And to me, that's the bottom line here, because if everything that's going on, no matter what Merrick Garland does, no matter who gets indicted, no matter what happens, blah, 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 blah. First of all, this hurdle that is in front of us, which apparently is just almost immovable, almost unchangeable, that because of the dreadful situation that we find ourselves in so many areas, that's very important to put people who know what they're doing back in charge of the country, Republicans, because Joe Biden and the Democrats, who have the House and the Senate barely, they've just ruined everything. And by God, we've gone a whole year without Republican leadership in the White House. Look at what's happened. Trump was this close to stamping out the coronavirus. He was this close and then was denied that second term, right? He was this close. So if we could just get him back in there, we'll get that leadership back and all these other ways. But that, assuming that it happens, puts Trump possibly on a glide path to getting renominated if he doesn't get indicted, which he might not be. We don't know. And
even if he is indicted, I mean,
even if he is.
There's still some question about it.
Right, Britt, why should being indicted be a barrier to being elected president of the United States? What better face to show the world again?
Exactly.
What better leadership position could we be in for the rest of the world to look at? I mean, I don't hear anything about Benjamin Netanyahu coming back in Israel. I don't hear that at all.
Well,
maybe I'm not reading the news, but in the United States, we have a guy, first one in 230 years, who lost, who one didn't admit that he lost because he's crazy and he can't handle it, and he doesn't want to be labeled a loser.
You can feel free to disagree, but pound for pound, the Israeli voters are a bit smarter than the American voters. Sorry, I'll say it. I'll go out on a limb and say something nutty.
Yeah, could you say something less controversial?
I'm sorry
Please.
if I put it out there.
Yeah,
The job
and you
of
know, and I know that it's really arrogant, obnoxious, elitist of us to say
yeah.
that the reason we're in this position is because we have a lot of stupid people who don't pay attention to the news, don't know anything, have no clue about I know, but it's true.
Yeah.
And the Republicans are better at appealing to those people. They
It's
just are.
That's very much true. It should be noted that in the immediate aftermath of January the 6th of 2021, the job of Mitch McConnell, to a lesser extent, was Kevin McCarthy because he's just an idiot. But Mitch McConnell was to kind of shore up, particularly the corporate donations to the Republican Party. And immediately you heard a lot of big companies say, we're not going to give money to people who supported this insurrection and this violence. And then as time went on, after a few months, they were like, maybe we will. That's kind of gone away.
No, actually, it hasn't. Yeah. No, it hasn't.
There's still
statistically, I believe the number is about 120 companies said no, and about 40 of them have gone back and started giving money. But wait, but
a quarter
you really should. You have to look at it the other way. Look at the ones that have stuck to their guns, that have said, no, we're not there. I mean, you're not going to get 100% of people.
In a year's time, there's been some melting, and we're in a midterm election, and these people want their shit done. So we'll see as we creep up toward November if these guys can keep it in their pants, because I don't think they're going to be able to.
But you have to be accurate in the numbers. You can't just say, oh, every one of them just started writing checks again.
It wasn't all of them, but some of them.
It wasn't even the majority of them. It wasn't even the majority.
It's just a quarter of them so far. And again, we're in an election year. We're creeping 9 months toward, and then we'll see how that holds up as we go forward, because they've been able to kind of slide back into it. Some of them have been just dipping a toe in because people weren't paying attention.
Well, it's just I see the glass as half full as always, and you're just Dr. Doom and Gloom.
Mitch's remarks drew a quick rebuke from the true leader of the Republican Party, Donald John Trump Sr., saying Mitch McConnell does not speak for the Republican Party, and he said he does not represent the views of the vast majority of its voters.
Well, see, this is the headline in and of itself says it all. Who the fuck made you the voice of the Republican Party? You're not even office hold. You're a loser. You got beat. But of course, he didn't get beat. He doesn't really believe he didn't get beat. He just doesn't want to be perceived as a loser. So, we're going through what we're going through. But it's the old, do we react to everything that Trump says, no matter how crazy?
It's not a matter of us. It's not a matter of us reacting. Right. It's that this is the Frankenstein's monster that was created partially by Mitch McConnell. This is partially his doing.
Well, technically, of course, something like that is true, because here's a guy, Mitch McConnell, who's elected in a state, a fairly small state, Kentucky, by a bare majority of people, which is, what was it, 1.5 million, whatever. No, it's tiny. So does he speak for the Republican Party based on that? No, but that's our system. That's how it works. It doesn't work that way. I mean, hey, Chuck Schumer represents a giant state with a lot of people. He got a lot more votes. Is he more representative of Democrats than Mitch? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But
that is the problem right now in the Republican Party is, who do we listen to? Do we listen to this guy or do we listen to this guy? And for a lot of voters, they've said you got to listen to the guy who had the election, quote unquote, stolen from him. So he never lost. He's undefeated. That's how they set this up.
Britt,
part of the people who set up Frankenstein's monster is the guy named Mitch McConnell.
Britt, people aren't listening to politicians at all. They listen to media figures.
That's cute that you would. That's interesting that you would say that. But I believe the insurrection was fueled by people listening to politicians in January 6th of 2021. I think that was a direct result of people listening to politicians.
Well, it was listening to a politician, but it was channeled through, people in the media, people on the internet, people with blogs, people with websites, people with podcasts.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, you're the one that's brought this up, that Tucker Carlson wants to run for president of the United States.
Very much so.
He's not a politician. Well, yes, he is. Donald Trump wanted to run for president of the United States. He wasn't a politician. Well, yes, he was. So the definition is so wide, it doesn't mean anything. And do Republicans in Florida listen to Mitch McConnell? Fuck no. They don't care who he is. You know what? If you did the famous walk down the street, show a picture of him to 100 people, most people wouldn't even know who he is. They wouldn't. They don't know who he is.
Yeah, but nonetheless, Donald Trump does have a lot of supporters who happen to be people like Oath Keepers and Promise Keepers, and they have inflicted violence, the likes of which we hadn't seen at the Capitol for 200 years. And they did listen. It wasn't just Donald Trump either. It was several other politicians. It was Josh Hawley, and it was Lauren Boebert, and it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it was several of those people.
Right. But isn't it great? The Democrats in states like North Carolina don't have quite the sway that we wish they would. But I like the fact that they are holding hard and fast on trying to decertify the qualifications of Madison Cawthorn to run for re-election, or I guess maybe election in a different district than he wants to run in, because he participated in the events of January 6th and helped ferment a revolt against the government of the United States. And because of the 14th Amendment clause, and it was specifically put in there, unfairly, of course, after the Civil War.
Right.
And the language saying that if you were a part of the Confederacy, if you plotted against the government of the United States, you're ineligible to run again for office now that the Union is all back together. And this is another one of those, boy, they could have never imagined when they wrote that 150 years later, that it might be applied under this circumstance. And we've talked about this 5 ways from Sunday, that there are connections between what's going on now and the Confederacy and the post-Civil War resistance to Reconstruction and the reimposition of segregation, all kinds of horrible laws that lasted for 75 years until we got into the 1960s, and voting rights were established for Black people and civil rights were established way more than they had been. But I want to call these people right now who are trying to destroy our country under the guise of, we are the patriots, we are protecting the Constitution. That's what they're doing, right? That's what people who attack the Capitol are. They're trying to protect the integrity of the election. They're trying to protect your right, everyone's right to vote. Every vote should be counted, except the ones that come in illegally after midnight on election day because of mail-in ballots and all that other crap that they're throwing. So I want to call these people modern day, out in the open Confederate termites. Okay. And when I use the word Confederate, or even get in the neighborhood of the Confederacy, it's not going to look like it did in 1860. It's not going to look that way. You're not going to have states trying to secede. That's too difficult. That's too painful. So what are they doing? They're doing what happens in your house when you have termites. Most of the time, you have no idea that they're there. You don't feel them. You don't see them. You don't smell them. And they're eating away at your foundation. They are eating away, eating away, eating away. And then suddenly, one day in your kitchen or your bathroom, wherever, you see some real problems with the floor or with the wall. Something's going on. Notice it. And then you call up Terminex or whoever you have. You're supposed to have the guarantee, right? You always get the guarantee when you buy the house. They come out once a year, but you haven't been paying attention. And your house is inundated. It's trouble. It's real trouble. But they were there, and you should have noticed, and you should have done something early on. And right now, the House of the United States is being eaten away by these Confederate termites. They're doing everything they can to wreck the framework of what we have. As rickety as it might be, as much of an experiment as the United States has been, in order to form a more perfect union. It doesn't say in order to form a perfect union, because it's never going to be that way. And it has been unfair to a lot of people of different races and colors and creeds, and it just has been. And we try to make it more perfect. But right now, the termites are ready to turn back the clock. They are ready to turn back the clock. That's an old phrase, but boy, it really is true. And we are right back to about 1854 at this moment with a lot of people.
You may call it destruction. Yeah. I call it what the termites are doing legitimate construction. That's what I call it. That's what I call it.
Legitimate constructive discourse.
That's okay. The lawsuit against Madison Cawthorn, which you talked about, was from a group of voters in Western North Carolina, which is the district he represents. It has gone. The State Board of Election now ruling, the thing can go forward. This is good. In 2 filings submitted to the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina, state attorneys called the Republican lawmakers, that's Cawthorn's arguments, dubious. And while any perceived burden as claimed by Cawthorn is outweighed by the interest of the state and of the people. If these challenges are to move forward, Cawthorn would essentially have to testify under oath about his role on January the 6th of 2021, as well as the conversations with former President Trump about efforts to delegitimize or overturn the 2020 election. And as you point out, this was after the Civil War. When it was running for office was a privilege. It was considered if you took up arms against the United States, you probably shouldn't be able to serve. This was in Madison Cawthorn. In his filing, he cites the Amnesty Act of 1872, which paved the way for some members of the Confederacy to serve in the U.S. government. So we've already addressed this.
So he's admitting already that he's guilty of something that he wants amnesty for. But guess what? You need to be punished first before we can get you your amnesty. So how about
we didn't. I didn't know this, and you probably didn't either. North Carolina state statutes give voters the right to challenge a candidate's running for office if there is reasonable suspicion or belief that the person accused may have the burden to prove his or her eligibility and show by a preponderance of the evidence of qualifications to run. And this would be in violation of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution.
Right. Well, when I started paying attention to this story earlier today, it suddenly hit me. Wait a minute. He's not the only one. Why is Jim Jordan in Ohio? Why is he allowed to run? Shouldn't they challenge his eligibility to run? If you were texting Donald Trump on January 6th, if you were talking to him on the phone on January 6th, you're part of it. You shouldn't be allowed to run for office right now. You know what? Let's do this like preschool. How about a little timeout? A couple of years. Maybe I'll let you back in. But right now, no.
That's interesting. He does seem to have a huge problem. I would say he's got a big legal problem.
You mean Cawthorn?
Yeah, Cawthorn has a big legal problem. I'd say he's got his tit in a ringer, as they might say. That's a Latin legal term, tit in a ringer. I don't know if you've ever been familiar with it, but that's what it seems like.
Titanotus ringanus. Yeah. That's what I learned that in law school, Titanotus ringanus.
I talked to my mother is represented by him in the United States House of Representatives, and I was telling her, well, he's going through this brutal divorce, and they were like, I didn't even know he was married. I had no idea that this guy was married. He's gone through a divorce. They thought, Brad, they would be able to take the pressure of the life that they have in Washington, and the couple just can't. So they've decided to go their separate ways. Very, very sad story in Western North Carolina.
Boy, I have something I could say that would be so horrible. I'm not going to say it. No, I'm not going to say it.
You don't want us to get Rogan, do you?
No. Can we go Rogan here a little bit for a moment again?
Absolutely.
Because it seems in the last day or so that, and I think at some level, this is just the defense of a scoundrel to play the freedom of speech card for Joe Rogan, as if his freedom of speech would be under assault if Spotify, because Neil Young, let's just pick a number, through his public pressure campaign, got 3 million people to drop Spotify, got a lot more artists to say, you can't play our music, we don't want it on there. And 10% of Spotify's employees all quit. That somehow would be denying Joe Rogan's freedom of speech because, and here's a tedious cliche, ready? The answer to bad speech that you disagree with is more speech.
Yeah.
That's always the answer.
It's cute.
No one, the last thing we ever want to do is stop at blah, 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 First Amendment. Okay, fine. Except there's something going on here. This is not denying his right to speak. This is not that at all. This is purely the free market working. It works in both directions.
It really does.
It doesn't just work for giant companies spewing out crap.
Right.
Okay. Are the same people who are defending unfettered Joe Rogan bringing on crank after crank to dispense mis and disinformation about dealing with the coronavirus? Or do they stand up for Facebook?
No, when Kathy Griffin
on
got
everything
trouble,
that they put up,
when Kathy Griffin got in trouble, these people fought hard to make sure that she didn't get canceled.
Right.
When the
Exactly.
Dixie Chicks got in trouble back in 2004, 2005, whatever it was, they stood up hard and they said, "No, don't you Country 105 crush those CDs with your steamroller down at the station." Yeah, they were defending it hard.
If I believe I remember correctly, because this is how far down the rabbit hole we've come in 20 plus years, right? 25 years. Their sin, those three women, the Dixie Chicks, their sin was standing on a stage in London saying, George W. Bush is not my president. Didn't they say something of that?
What they said specifically was, we're ashamed that the president of the United States is from Texas.
Okay.
That was what they said.
Excuse me. Even worse, right? Okay. So just think about that. And that truly, we didn't call it that. The phrase hadn't been thought of. It wasn't used. That was cancel culture, okay? Because that was a tsunami of outrage orchestrated by the largest broadcaster in the country at the time, then called Clear Channel Communications, now called I Heart My Fucking Radio Station, or whatever it's called, okay? But they had tremendous power, and they destroyed those women's careers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were not heard of for at least a decade.
They kind of muddled along and did well, but they were not anywhere near what they were. They did okay, but they did not do anything like they'd done before. They were crushed. Now, in the case of Joe Rogan, what's happened? Just in the last week, he's got more people listening to him than ever before. More people have discovered him than ever knew that he had a podcast. And he has an equivalent offer from another company at the same price to do what he's doing. So please stop the whining and the crying over the crushing of Joe Rogan's freedom of speech. He's already sold out his freedom of speech to one company. He already sold it. It already was up for bid. So stop it. Just stop it. I think Tom Friedman in today's Times just about has it right. Yes, of course, Joe Rogan can have any crank he wants on his stupid ass fucking podcast, lying and saying stupid shit about the vaccine and everything. He has a quote right to do that, but he has a responsibility not to do that. And you don't just get the right without exhibiting some responsibility, because if you don't, you know what happens? Neil Young calls your ass out.
Neil Young kicks your ass.
I will.
Okay.
I'll just go ahead and again, I'll just re-express how disappointed I am in Pearl Jam for not following suit, because they've loved this guy for 30 years, but now they're not even supporting him or taking their music off of there. There is a clip that I shared on Twitter from the Joe Rogan show where he has one of these pseudo scientist cultural dudes on. I don't know who the guy is, but he's floating the idea that Africans have a genetic predisposition to violence that Europeans and white folks don't. Now he doesn't. He says, "Hey, the research is out there. I encourage you to do it." And Rogan's not on board, going, "You're right. That's true." But he doesn't actually stop the guy and go, "You're full of shit. That's bullshit, and that's very dangerous to be saying that on my show." But the guy actually floats the idea that there's research out there showing that there is a gene that Africans carry that makes them more predisposed to violence than their Caucasian brothers and sisters.
Right. Okay. Now, when somebody says something like that, my first inclination is to say they shouldn't be allowed to say that. I'm not saying that the government should shut down whatever show or, and that would be an abridgment of someone's First Amendment right. But what should happen is, number one, you shouldn't have had that person on to begin with. But number two, if they say it, you have to be ready to counter it with intelligent facts that refute it. But you can't just play this game of saying that the host is a victim of the people that he has on who say things that are just off the wall and are wrong and are lies and are dangerous in a world where, yes, that's right, more people get their medical information from Joe Rogan than from Dr. Fauci. So as long as it's that way.
Well, there's a segment of our country, and again, I don't know what the percentage is or whatever, who would say, "Do you believe Dr. Fauci or would you believe Joe Rogan?" If it's
that's why 15, I said it. That's why I said that.
If it's 15% of human beings, how many deaths does that result in? How many sicknesses? And okay, let's just say you go to the hospital and you're only in the hospital for 2 months, and you make it out. So what? You've racked up what, $700,000, $800,000 in medical bills? Joe Rogan going to help you with that? Is he going to write you a check out of that $100 million to help you out with that because you followed his advice and it didn't work out for you? I mean, come on. This is stupidity. This is madness. There's a story from, this is, I guess, the Hollywood Reporter. Joe Rogan returns to stand-up stage, mocks his controversy. I guess he was in Austin where he has moved his production. He's part of that California exodus that happened a couple of years ago. And he is talking about it. And I would say, again, from the PR part of this, he's hit a home run. He really has done very well from the public. I think it's completely disingenuous. I don't believe anything that he said, but he's presented a public face that is thoughtful, that is reasonable, and he's not going crazy. Now, I don't know if in these stand-up situations where he's like, well, we got those fuckers fooled. What a bunch of dumbasses they are. But right now he's doing everything that he can to be solicitous toward his employer and kind of do the stuff that Joe, if you would just release this statement.
No, you're right.
He's from a PR point of view, he's taken a note that I did not think was possible for him. I don't know if he's following other people's advice or if this is coming out of his own head, but he's been able to handle it exactly correctly.
Very media savvy. That's all, right? Very, very media savvy. I'm giving that my way. Here you go, because it isn't just him. Oh, this one. Have you seen this guy who's the Surgeon General of Florida? This guy is just fucking wackadoodle off the charts. This guy is nuts. Dr. Joseph Ladapo refusing to tell you whether he's been vaccinated or not. This is the lead doctor, the guy who was hired by Ron DeSantis, a black guy, of course, has to be, of course. And he found the worst black doctor with a degree from Harvard that you could find. A complete whack job. Just a nut. And so maybe you are better off listening to Joe Rogan. Now I'm starting to wonder if it gets down to this guy or Rogan. I'm not sure.
when it
And I
comes to part of the Harvard problem, right? Is that we would identify there's a bit of a Harvard problem out there.
Well, but sometimes it's a Duke problem. Often it's a Harvard problem.
I've identified, and it's super unfortunate that I tar and feather, Duke University with Rand Paul's, shortcomings. But he's just like the most public guy out there doing stuff. This one, speaking of presenting things in a public way and being media savvy, you may have seen this one in that new book that you were referencing the other day. Steve Bannon thought that Trump looked like Hitler as he descended from that escalator at his 2016 campaign debut. And by the way, when he says he looked like Hitler, that's a compliment in Steve Bannon's eyes.
Well, I saw this morning when I got up this morning, because if you were with us on the previous Brad and Britt cast, you know that in the middle of it, I did get a call from the dog groomer to remind me about an appointment that we had earlier this morning at 8 o'clock. So I was up really, really early, and I had on CNN, and they were interviewing Jeremy Peters, the writer for the New York Times, who took some time off, I think, to write this book. By the way, Peters was the guy who was assigned during the campaign of 2020. He had to follow around Michael Bloomberg for a while. So when Bloomberg was in Greensboro, remember I went down to see Bloomberg,
right?
Because Bloomberg had about 2 weeks of, oh my God, he might be right. So I went and saw him, and Peters was there. I talked to him for a second. He's a nice guy, and he wrote this book. I saw him this morning, and when he described what you're talking about, which is this moment that Bannon told him that, and this is Bannon speaking, that moment when Trump came down the escalator at Trump Tower, the first thought that came into my mind, Bannon's mind, was Hitler.
Oh my God, that's Hitler. That's what.
And then this is Peter speaking. And of course, this was in a complimentary way. This wasn't a. He's going to round up all the Jews. It was he has such command. Right. He knows how to assemble a crowd and get them on his side and do all the. Now, with that being said, and I don't think that Bannon's going to dispute what's in the book. It's not going to happen. Peters is a good reporter. I'm sure it's been vetted, and I'm sure it's true. What that does is it adds on to the 12 times over the last few years, maybe 20 times, that we have said Godwin's law is dead, and that anybody who uses the Hitler-Trump comparison should be banished. No, we've said all along that the comparison was legitimate. All the way, we've never shied away from it. Of course, I don't know if this has happened to you. I have been banned. I have been suspended by Facebook a couple of times if I've ever made reference to Hitler and Trump, because of course Facebook has standards Spotify doesn't. Okay. But the fact, just think about this, the fact that Trump's number one advisor, certainly at that time, it was Steve Bannon, who was helping to steer him in whatever direction Bannon thought Trump could be steered into from a policy and from a PR standpoint, although Trump had the instincts to do this kind of crap himself, obviously. It wasn't somebody telling him what to do. Nobody tells baby what to do.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
But just think of that. The building blocks of Trumpism are Hitlerism. And in the book, Bannon says it made him recall the opening scenes of that Leni Riefenstahl movie about Hitler, one of the most pernicious propaganda. What's it called?
I was looking at the Leni Riefenstahl file, and
what's it called? I can't remember the name of it. It's
let me look at this. Mountain of Destiny, and then Das Blue Light was also another one.
No, but that's not the one. That's not the famous one.
The really famous one.
There's a really extremely famous one that's so famous I can't think of the name of it.
Der Sieg des Glaubens?
No, fucking it's in English. Say it in English.
Is the Victory of Faith?
No.
Okay. Well, these are ones that I'm citing that are off of the Triumph of the Will. Is that
the
one?
That's
Triumph
the
of
one.
the Will. There we go.
That is the one.
Triumph des Willens.
Yeah. Because apparently at the beginning of that movie, Hitler does something that reminded Bannon of that Trump moment. Or Trump did something that reminded him of that Hitler moment. Apparently, Bannon was there at that, that Hitler rally in 1933 at Nuremberg. Okay, he was there.
This is how deep that Bannon is into this shit. He studied Leni Riefenstahl, and what she was able to do visually was to make Hitler look like a god, essentially, to make him look so much bigger than the moment. And that was part of the entire propaganda campaign that helped win over some of the people in Germany, a lot of the people in Germany, unfortunately. And that's the first thing is he's like, oh my God, this is him. This is the Leni Riefenstahl Hitler as Trump descends from the thing. And again, as most of us would say, ooh, that's Hitler, and it would be a bad thing. In Bannon's eyes, that's like, oh my God, I finally found it. It's the Holy Grail.
And you know what? I'm glad that book's coming out now. I'm glad that some of these revelations are spaced out a couple days apart, because it takes a little bit of time to digest each one, which, of course, as always, it's not just as bad as you thought it might be, but it's always worse. Every factoid that comes out about Trump and his personality and what he's done and what he's all about is worse than you could have imagined. This is worse. I wonder, and I haven't read the book, you haven't either. I wonder if this was ever actually discussed with Trump, because again, and now I'm really digging back into the canyons of my mind, which are very, very deep, but they're actually shallow. Wasn't there a story that Trump had some kind of Hitler book on his nightstand? They tried to deny that one greatly, but there was some kind of yes, which is, I mean, it's funny to think that Trump would read, number one, right? Well, he had the audio book. Hitler was actually, he had a great voice. A lot of people, you don't hear very much, but it sounded something like, "You will go down the stairs. You come down, if it's an escalator in a tall building, you come down with the wife and you hire a bunch of crisis actors and they will cheer for you. And the next thing you know, you'll be president."
This was now you'll forget this one as well. Last year in the Michael Bender book, it was said that Donald Trump said to General Kelly that Hitler did a lot of good things.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's another one that I'd forgotten about. The Trump between the link between Trump and Hitler is not quite as tenuous as some people would like for you to think. You know, that it's not quite as like, no, it's not that far-fetched. There's a little, because you could see a guy like Donald Trump, and I don't know if, again, I don't know if there is audio of this. I'm not going to say audio tape. I'm not going to say videotape, because those things don't exist. I'm not going to say if there's audio or a video of him going, Hitler did some good stuff, but you can imagine him admiring someone who had that sort of an image, that a Leni Riefenstahl kind of thing where he looks like he's towering over people and people are so submissive to him, right? Hitler in front of all of these troops, all of this military, and all of these people are just looking to this man for leadership. And you can imagine Donald Trump going, yes, I have to have that. I want that in my life. I have allegedly billions of dollars. I really don't have billions of dollars, but I don't have that. I don't have that sort of fealty, and I'd like to be like that.
Well, I think we can extend that out, that imagery, to, in your mind's eye, just think about all those years where once a year on the NBC nightly news, when you were a kid, once a year they would have that film of whatever May Day in Moscow, right? And the Soviet Politburo, whether the leader was Brezhnev or Andropov or whatever. Maybe
Andropov, that was like a 2-week period.
Yuri Andropov, and he dropped off after a couple weeks.
He dropped. That was the great joke in America. What happened to Andropov? Oh, he dropped off. Yeah. That was a great joke in America for like a month.
Right, and you know, the scene would be tens of thousands of people marching, military uniforms, the military hardware, the strength, the godlike imagery that was there. You see it in China. You certainly saw it with Fidel Castro. You see it in North Korea now with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
the dictators of the world, they all must have watched Triumph of the Will too. Or maybe it's just instinctive that when you want to go extra beyond democracy and become a dictator, this is what you do.
Yeah.
This is what you have to get done. This is, you have to get people to submit their wills to you. And this is one of the ways you do it. You do it through a combination of what you think is your charisma and power, raw power.
Well, that's it.
Threats.
Again, that's his man. That's his man crush on Putin too. Putin with all the all the medals and shit and the military stuff, and he's shirtless on a horseback. That's why he's got such a hard on for Putin.
Right. Well, that's certainly part of it. And as you know, who's the greatest hockey player in all of Russia? Who's the greatest hockey player? It's Putin.
It's Putin. Oh yeah, that's right.
Every year he gets out there, and he doesn't like to be obnoxious about it, but every year he plays one game and he scores like about 20 goals, and nobody can stop him.
Wouldn't it be great if there was some guy who just said, fuck it, I'm just gonna check the shit out of this guy and knocked him on his ass. And I mean, the guy'd be dead in 4 seconds, but it'd be great if there was just some guy that checked the fuck out of him and knocked a couple of teeth out of that bastard's ass. That'd be so great.
Yeah. So, I want to see and hear more about that book by Jeremy Peters, because every time you think, oh God, everything's been written, what's left? Well, there can't be anything more. We know all this. Some of the books repeat some of the same incidents and from different standpoints or with different witnesses. And just when you think it's over, it's not over. It's just they're still writing books about Lincoln. They're still writing books about Roosevelt. So, there'll be books about this idiot, long when you and I are worm food. Okay. They'll still be writing books about him if books are still being written.
Oh, I saw one of those, you come from time to time, you go one of those movies that everybody's seen that you haven't seen. I did finally see The Boys from Brazil over the weekend.
Oh God.
Yeah, I didn't.
Gregory Peck.
I did. That's one of the first things that Steve Gutenberg ever did. It was like one of the first films. Isn't Gregory Peck just fantastic? He's so creepy. I can't imagine them going to him and going, what you're going to do in this movie is you're going to play Dr. Joseph Mengele. And he's like, what, really? is that what I'm going to do? But yeah, he's very good. By
the way, you know what he said first? When he said, could you get me some video of Dr. Fauci? See what I did there?
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah. That kind of kills it, doesn't it?
See you on Thursday.